They say the people who kill you never come with knives. They come with smiles, with soft voices, with love in their eyes. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? On a quiet morning in Silver Lake, California, Emily Carter woke up the way she always did. Sunlight slipping through the tall glass windows of her modern hillside home, the smell of fresh coffee drifting up the stairs, and the sound of her husband humming downstairs. To anyone looking from the outside, Emily had won at life. A successful interior designer, a millionaire marriage, a beautiful 8-year-old son, a husband who never forgot her medicine, especially her medicine. Emily suffered from a rare heart condition. It wasn't deadly, not if treated correctly, and for the last 6 years, Daniel Carter, her husband, had made it his personal mission to take care of her. Every morning, without fail, he handed her 2 white pills with a kiss on her forehead. "Your heart before my heart," he always said. Emily believed him. She trusted him with her life. That morning, she swallowed the pills like always, never knowing they were slowly killing her. 6 months earlier, Emily had started feeling strange. It began with dizziness, then sudden shortness of breath. Her heart would race violently at night, as if trying to escape her chest. Sometimes she woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, convinced she was dying. Daniel brushed it off. "Stress," he said. "You work too much. Your condition can flare up sometimes." He said it with such calm confidence that Emily doubted herself. After all, Daniel worked in finance. He was smart, organized, always in control, the kind of man doctors trusted, the kind of man who could commit murder without leaving fingerprints. One afternoon changed everything. Emily was getting ready for a charity gala, one of those glamorous events filled with champagne, cameras, and quiet judgment. She reached into her walk-in closet to grab her favorite Louis Vuitton handbag. The moment her fingers touched it, something felt wrong. The leather was stiff, the weight was off, the stitching wasn't perfect. Her stomach tightened. Emily examined it under the light. The logo was crooked. Her heartbeat spiked, not from her condition, but from instinct. She rushed back into the closet. Her Prada tote? Fake. Her Channel clutch? Fake. Her YSL heels? Knockoffs. Hands shaking, she opened her jewelry drawer. Her diamond tennis bracelet didn't sparkle the way it used to. The emerald earrings her mother gave her, glass. Her grandmother's vintage ruby ring, the stone replaced with a cheap imitation. Emily sat down slowly on the floor. Daniel had been replacing her valuables, selling the originals, lying straight to her face. But why? They weren't broke. At least, that's what Daniel always told her. Then a terrifying thought crept into her mind. Her heart symptoms, the worsening attacks, the timing. Emily stood up and walked to her nightstand. The pill bottle, the one Daniel picked up for her every month. For the first time in her marriage, she didn't trust what was inside. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. Emily grabbed her keys and drove straight to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. At the cardiology department, she placed the bottle on the counter. "Can you please check this?" she asked quietly. "I think something might be wrong." The doctor examined the pills, then pulled up her prescription history. His expression changed. Confusion. Concern, fear. "Mrs. Carter, who gave you these?" "My husband," Emily replied. "He always picks them up for me."
The doctor swallowed hard. "These aren't your heart medications. They're a high-dose blood pressure drug. For someone with your condition, this could be fatal." Emily gripped the counter to stay upright. Natural. Accidental. Perfect. That's when she understood the truth. Daniel wasn't stealing from her. He was erasing her. Her money, her assets, her life insurance, her inheritance. He wanted it all, and he wanted her dead. Emily walked out of that hospital, no longer a wife. She walked out a survivor, a woman who had just crawled out of her own grave. That night, she cooked dinner, helped her son with homework, kissed Daniel goodnight. She smiled. At 2:17 a.m., while Daniel slept beside her, Emily gently slid his phone from the nightstand. His password: their son's birthday. Predictable. The truth unfolded fast. Messages to a woman named Rachel Monroe, not about fitness, but about their 5-year-old daughter, Emily never knew existed. Emails to Vanessa Lynn, a wealthy tech investor. Daniel promised marriage after Emily's health declined. And hidden deep inside his files, a visa application. Dubai. One person. Daniel Carter. Emily's lips curled at a slow, dangerous smile. "You poisoned the wrong woman," she whispered. Because Emily Carter wasn't going to die. She was going to make him beg. Daniel thought his wife was weak. He thought she was dying. He thought he had time. What he didn't know was that Emily had already started building his execution. She makes the first move, a single call that will turn his lovers into weapons and begin the destruction of his entire world.
Emily smiled and swallowed the pills. She held Daniel's gaze while doing it. Soft eyes, obedient nod, the same trusting expression he'd trained her to wear for years. Then she waited. She waited until the front door closed, until his car pulled down the driveway, until the house fell completely silent. Only then did she walk into the bathroom, lock the door, and open her mouth. The pills dropped into her palm. Perfect, clean, white. She stared at them for a long moment, then flushed them down the toilet and sat on the cold tile floor. Emily didn't plan revenge. She planned sequence. Because if Daniel noticed even one wrong step, one wrong breath, one wrong look, she would be dead before anyone realized she was in danger. That morning, Daniel felt powerful. Emily could see it in him. The way he moved through the kitchen, relaxed. The way he poured her juice without looking. The way he checked his phone while she drank. He believed the poison was working. And for the first time since the hospital, Emily felt fear crawl up her spine. Not panic, precision-level fear. So she leaned into it. Over the next 10 days, Emily became exactly what Daniel expected. She forgot small things. She leaned on walls too long. She asked him to repeat himself. Once, just once, she overdid it. She pretended to lose balance near the stairs. Daniel caught her arm, too quickly, too tightly. He stared at her face for half a second longer than necessary. "You okay?" he asked. Emily forced a laugh. "I think I stood up too fast." Daniel nodded. But that night, Emily noticed something new. He watched her sleep. Not lovingly, clinically. She realized then one mistake and he would accelerate the timeline. She made the first call the next evening. Not from the house, not from her phone. She drove 3 blocks away and used a burner. The name on Daniel's screen read, "RM That Pilates." The call rang. "Hello?" a woman answered, cautious, distracted. "Rachel Monroe,
Emily said. "My name is Emily Carter." Silence. Then a sharp laugh. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." "You're lying," Rachel snapped. "I know what he said. He said I was sick, that we were basically done, that he stayed out of guilt." Rachel's breathing changed. "I wish I were lying, but I have medical records, bank statements, and proof he's been poisoning me." "That's insane," Rachel whispered. "He loves me." Emily closed her eyes. "How old is your daughter?" The line went dead quiet. 5. "And what does she call him?" Rachel didn't answer. Emily hung up, not because the call failed, but because the hook was set. Rachel called back 20 minutes later, crying. They met the next day at a cafe near Pasadena, not a quiet one. Emily chose noise on purpose. Chaos keeps people from thinking clearly. Rachel looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "I didn't want to believe you," she said immediately. "I kept telling myself you were jealous or bitter." Emily slid the folder across the table. Rachel opened it. Texts, timelines, photos of Emily very much alive and very much married. Then the medical report. Rachel's hands shook. "He said you were already gone," she whispered. "He said it was only a matter of time." "It was," Emily said, "just not the way he planned." Rachel pushed the folder back. "I can't," she said suddenly. "He scares me, and my daughter." Emily leaned forward. "He's leaving," she said quietly. "There's a visa application. Dubai. One person." Rachel froze. "He'll disappear," Emily continued. "And when he does, he won't send money, he won't call, and if you say anything now, he'll say you're lying." Rachel looked up, eyes filling with terror. "You're already alone," Emily said gently. "This is your only chance not to be abandoned with a child and a story no one believes." Rachel nodded. Once. The second call was harder. Emily emailed Vanessa Lynn and waited. Vanessa didn't respond for 3 hours. When she did, it was one sentence. "Tomorrow, my office." Vanessa Lynn was not cold, she was controlled, and there was a difference. Emily saw it the moment she mentioned Daniel's name. A flicker, a tightening of the jaw. "He told me you died 2 years ago," Vanessa said flatly. "I defended him when people warned me." That was the crack. Just one. Enough. Emily showed her everything. When she reached the Dubai visa, Vanessa stood up abruptly. "That money," she said quietly. "My father lost everything trusting a man like him." She turned back. "He didn't just steal from me," she said. "He insulted me." Emily nodded. "He underestimated all of us." The group chat didn't form easily. Rachel panicked. Vanessa wanted lawyers first. Emily insisted on timing. Voices clashed. Fear argued with anger. Finally, Emily sent one message. "He's still poisoning me." Silence followed. Then Rachel typed, "Sunday. He thinks Sundays are safe." Daniel walked into the living room Sunday night, smiling. That smile vanished instantly. Rachel stood rigid by the window. Vanessa sat with her arms crossed. Emily stood, not weak, not shaking, alive. "What the hell is this?" Daniel laughed. "Emily, you shouldn't be standing." "You told her I was dead," Emily said. Daniel turned to Rachel. "Baby, she's confused." "Don't," Rachel snapped. "Don't say another word." Daniel's eyes flicked to Vanessa. "This is a misunderstanding." Vanessa slid documents across the table. "Your accounts are frozen." Daniel lunged toward Emily. She stepped back. The door burst open. "Police!" Daniel screamed. As they cuffed him, he looked at Emily, terrified, unrecognizing. "You were supposed to be gone," he whispered. Emily leaned close. "I was," she said. "And now I get to decide how this ends." Daniel thought prison would be the worst thing that could happen to him. He was wrong. He learns the truth Emily never told Rachel or Vanessa, a truth that will follow him every morning and every night, long after the cell door closes.
Daniel Carter didn't sleep the first night in jail. Not because of fear, because his mind refused to accept the truth. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily standing in the living room, upright, steady, alive, not weak, not fading, watching him like someone who had already won. That wasn't how this was supposed to end. He had calculated everything: the dosage, the timeline, the medical narrative. Her death was meant to be slow, clean, tragic. Instead, she was the one who walked away. The guards processed Daniel before dawn. Fingerprinting, photographs, a temporary cell. They took his belt, his watch, his wedding ring. The ring made him flinch, not because he loved Emily, but because it reminded her she was supposed to be gone. Inside the holding cell, another man laughed. "The first time?" he asked. Daniel didn't answer. He sat on the bench, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of the past 6 months, searching for the crack, the mistake, the moment Emily must have figured it out. The handbag? No, too small. The doctor? Impossible. He controlled the prescriptions. Then he remembered something. The bathroom, the pills, that tiny pause before she swallowed. Daniel's stomach tightened. Emily sat in her car outside the jail for a long time before driving away. She wasn't there to watch him suffer. She was there to remind herself of something important. This wasn't over. Prison wasn't the punishment. It was the container. The real sentence would come later. 3 days later, Daniel met his attorney. Confident, polished, expensive. "Your wife doesn't want a trial," the lawyer said. "She's cooperating fully." Daniel leaned back. "Of course she is," he said. "She's emotional. That makes people sloppy." The lawyer hesitated. "There's something else." Daniel smiled. "Spit it out." "She declined spousal privilege." The smile vanished. Daniel leaned forward. "What?" "She's testifying against you, fully." Daniel laughed sharply. "She wouldn't," he said. "She needs me." The lawyer didn't laugh back. "She doesn't." That night, Daniel finally slept and dreamt of Emily. Not dying, watching. Emily didn't attend the first hearing. She didn't want Daniel to see her again yet. Instead, she visited the one place he never expected, the cemetery. There was a headstone there, not hers, but close enough to make her hands tremble. A woman who had died the year before from cardiac complications. Emily stood still. She hadn't known her, but she recognized the pattern. That night, Emily opened a folder she had kept hidden, even from Rachel and Vanessa. Inside were 3 names, 3 women, 3 timelines, all connected to Daniel, all dead. Natural causes, all wealthy. Emily closed the folder. This was the truth she hadn't told anyone yet. Daniel didn't start with her. She was just the one who survived. Daniel's confidence returned during the 2nd week. Prison routines gave him structure, predictability. He told himself Emily was bluffing, that prosecutors exaggerated, that women talked too much and followed through too little. Then the letters started. Not hate mail, not threats. Information. Typed, neatly organized. Dates, medical reports, bank withdrawals, case summaries. 1 letter per week, always unsigned. Daniel tried to laugh them off until the 3rd letter. It included a photo, a gravestone. Daniel's hands shook for the first time. Emily met Rachel at a playground that afternoon. Rachel watched her daughter climb the slide, laughing, safe, alive. Emily nodded. "You never told me," Rachel said quietly. Emily replied, "I couldn't, not until I knew." "Knew what?" "How many?" Rachel turned pale. "How many what?" how many women he buried, Emily said, and how close I came to joining them. Rachel swallowed. And now? Emily looked at the child. Now he knows I know. The trial date was set. Daniel expected Emily to break, to cry, to hesitate, to soften. She didn't. When she finally walked into the courtroom, she didn't look like a victim. She looked like evidence. The jury watched her closely. Daniel couldn't, because for the first time he understood something terrifying. Emily wasn't angry anymore. She was finished. On the stand, Emily spoke calmly. She explained the pills, the replacements, the symptoms. Then she paused. And then, she said, I discovered I wasn't the first. The courtroom stilled. Daniel's attorney stood. Objection! Emily continued. There were other women, similar circumstances, similar outcomes. The judge allowed it. Daniel felt the room tilt. Emily turned toward Daniel for the first time since his arrest. I lived, she said. They didn't. Daniel's throat closed. That night, back in his cell, Daniel found the final letter. No evidence, no documents, just one line. You taught me how to disappear slowly. Now you'll live knowing you almost did. Daniel stared at the paper until morning. Daniel believed the truth was finally out. He was wrong. The prosecution uncovers something Emily didn't even expect. A detail buried so deep it threatens to collapse the entire case and might give Daniel one last chance to escape.
The problem with truth is that it doesn't always arrive clean. Sometimes it arrives damaged, incomplete, and dangerous to the people who uncover it. Emily learned that the morning her lawyer called and didn't say hello. We have a problem, he said. Emily sat down slowly at her kitchen table. What kind? She asked. The kind that gives Daniel oxygen. The prosecution had been confident, too confident. Medical evidence, financial fraud, multiple witnesses. Attempted murder felt airtight. But the past, Daniel's past, was murkier than anyone expected. The 3 women Emily had uncovered, 2 of their deaths had never been investigated properly. No autopsies, no toxicology preserved. One file was missing entirely. And worse, the timeline didn't match. In the district attorney's office, voices rose. We can't introduce unproven prior deaths, one prosecutor snapped. It'll get thrown out. But they show pattern, another argued. They show suspicion, not certainty. Emily sat silently at the end of the table. She had expected resistance. She hadn't expected doubt. If we push this wrong, the lead prosecutor said carefully, Daniel's defense could argue emotional manipulation, an unstable woman, inventing ghosts. Emily's fingers curled against the chair. Inventing. That word burned. Meanwhile, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt since his arrest. Hope. His attorney laid it out plainly. The prosecution overreached, she said. They don't have hard evidence on the prior deaths. Daniel leaned forward. So what does that mean? It means we shift the narrative from predator to paranoid spouse. Daniel smiled slowly. She kept files, he said, folders, names. The attorney raised an eyebrow. Did she share them? No, Daniel replied. She never trusted anyone fully. The attorney smiled back. Good. Emily didn't sleep that night. For the first time since the hospital, fear returned. Not of death, but of exposure. If Daniel painted her as unstable, obsessive, delusional, the jury wouldn't see a survivor. They'd see a woman who snapped. At 3:12 a.m., Emily made a decision. She opened the folder again, the one she had hidden, and removed one name.
The defense struck hard. During pretrial motions, they attacked Emily's credibility. She conducted her own investigation, the defense attorney said, collected information illegally, contacted witnesses under false pretenses. Rachel was questioned aggressively. You were emotionally distressed, correct? You feared losing your child? You were influenced by Mrs. Carter. Rachel broke down. Vanessa held firm, but even she faltered when asked, "Didn't you invest money based on romantic expectations?" The courtroom shifted. Not much, but enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge requested a closed hearing. Emily sat alone on the bench while lawyers whispered. The judge finally spoke. "I am concerned that the prosecution's theory relies too heavily on circumstantial pattern." Emily's heart pounded. If the jury perceives speculation, this entire case risks collapse. Collapse. Daniel looked at Emily across the room and smiled. That afternoon, Emily received a message from an unknown number. One sentence, "You're not the only one who kept records." Emily's breath caught. She didn't show anyone. Not yet. Daniel was transferred that night. New cell, new block. A mistake. Because prisons have memories and men who talk. One inmate recognized his name. "You're the guy with the wives," the man muttered. Daniel ignored him. Then the man leaned closer. "My sister died like that," he said. "Heart issues, rich husband." Daniel's blood went cold. Emily followed the message's instructions the next day. A storage unit, paid in cash. Inside was a box, medical journals, prescription logs, photographs, and a USB drive. Not Emily's work. Someone else had been watching Daniel long before she ever suspected him. At the bottom of the box was a note. "I tried to stop him. I failed. You didn't." Emily closed her eyes. This wasn't overreach. This was buried truth. But truth cuts both ways. The defense learned about the storage unit within hours. "How?" Emily asked. He didn't answer, because the answer was obvious. Someone was leaking. That night, Daniel received a visit. Not a lawyer, not a guard, a man from internal investigations. "You knew one of the prior victims worked at a pharmaceutical distributor," the man said. Daniel didn't speak. "She kept records," the investigator continued, "not emotional ones, professional ones." Daniel swallowed. The man leaned closer. "You didn't kill your first wife, did you?" Daniel whispered. "No." The investigator nodded slowly. "Good. Because if you had, this would already be over." Emily thought she was building a case. She wasn't. She was uncovering a network. She learns the most terrifying truth yet. Daniel didn't start this alone, and he was never meant to be the last one standing.
The storage unit smelled like dust and old paper. Emily stood inside it longer than she needed to, not touching anything, just breathing, steady, controlled, trying to understand the weight of what she had just uncovered. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't coincidence. Someone else had been watching Daniel Carter long before she ever suspected him. And that meant one terrifying thing. Daniel hadn't been acting alone. Or if he had, someone had helped him hide it. Back home, Emily spread the contents of the box across her dining table. The organization was meticulous, not emotional, not chaotic, professional. There were prescription logs dating back more than a decade, not only Daniel's name, but aliases, variations, slight misspellings, enough to avoid patterns unless you knew where to look. Medical journals were highlighted, certain medications circled repeatedly. drugs that interacted subtly with pre-existing heart conditions, drugs that degraded over time, drugs that mimicked natural decline. Someone had studied this. Someone had tested it. Emily felt cold settle in her chest. Daniel wasn't just cruel, he was methodical. The USB drive took longer to open. Emily hesitated before clicking, because some truths change shape once seen. Inside were audio files, dates in the file names. She pressed play. A woman's voice filled the room, calm, clinical, strained. If anything happens to me, Daniel Carter needs to be investigated. He is careful, he uses plausible deniability, and he doesn't work alone. Emily paused the recording. Her hands were shaking. Rachel arrived an hour later. She took one look at Emily's face and said, "He's not just a liar, is he?" Emily shook her head. "No," she replied. "He's a pattern." Rachel sat slowly. "And patterns repeat." "Yes," Emily said, "unless someone breaks them." Vanessa joined them that evening. She listened in silence as Emily explained. When the recording ended, Vanessa spoke quietly. "This isn't just a murder case," she said. "It's exposure." Rachel frowned. "What does that mean?" Vanessa leaned forward. "It means if this comes out fully, Daniel won't be the only one destroyed." That night, Daniel felt the walls closing in again. The investigator's visit hadn't been a coincidence. Neither was the transfer. Men around him whispered now, not accusations, questions. "How'd your wife die? You got lucky. Who taught you?" Daniel didn't answer. He knew better. But silence can be louder than confession. Daniel's attorney arrived the next morning, tense, hurried. "There's new evidence," she said. Daniel leaned back. "From her?" "From someone else," the attorney replied, "and it predates Emily." Daniel's jaw cracked, just slightly. "They have audio, logs, research." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They won't understand it. It's technical." Her attorney stared at him. "They understand enough to know you didn't improvise." Emily met with the lead prosecutor that afternoon. He looked exhausted. "This changes things," he admitted, "but it also complicates them." "Because it's bigger," Emily said. "Yes," he replied, "and people don't like admitting systems fail." Emily nodded. "But systems do fail," she said, "unless someone forces them to look." The prosecutor studied her. "You realize," he said slowly, "that if this goes public, you'll be the center of it." Emily didn't hesitate. "I already am." The media caught the scent. Not names yet, but phrases. Possible serial pattern, uninvestigated deaths, medical exploitation. Daniel watched the news from a shared television, heart pounding. The story didn't say his name, but it didn't need to. Everyone was already looking at him. Emily received another message that night. Different number, same tone. "You found the box. Good, but you still don't know who helped him." Emily stared at the screen. Her reply was immediate. "Then tell me." The response came 5 minutes later. "A doctor." Daniel's world shrank fast. Privileges revoked. Isolation extended. Attorney visits restricted. He felt hunted now, not from Emily, but from something bigger. The system he thought he'd manipulated had started pushing back. Emily barely slept. Her mind replayed one question over and over. If a doctor helped him, how many deaths were misclassified? How many families never knew? And how close had she come to becoming just another file? The next morning, the prosecutor called. "We found something," he said. "A consulting physician, not on staff, not permanent." Emily closed her eyes. He helped falsify reports, adjusted language, suggested causes. Emily exhaled slowly. Is he cooperating? Yes, the prosecutor said. He says Daniel threatened to expose him. Emily felt something twist in her stomach. Daniel hadn't just killed, he'd controlled. That afternoon, Emily stood alone in her living room, the same room where Daniel had smiled, where he'd handed her poison, where he believed he was untouchable. She realized then what this had become, not revenge, responsibility. If she stopped now, the pattern would continue. If she spoke, it would end. Daniel learned the truth that night from a guard who shouldn't have spoken. "They're charging the doctor," the guard muttered. "He flipped on you." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time, fear didn't feel abstract. It felt final. Daniel thought exposure was his worst fear. He was wrong.
The question didn't appear all at once. It crept in, quietly. At first, it lived in headlines as a suggestion, a murmur wrapped in cautious language. Authorities reviewing additional deaths, potential links under investigation. But within days, the language sharpened, and the question everyone was thinking finally surfaced, bold and unavoidable. How many? Daniel heard it from another inmate. They were watching the evening news when the anchor paused, her voice carefully neutral. Prosecutors have confirmed they are reopening multiple unexplained deaths connected to Daniel Carter's past relationships. The inmate turned to Daniel. "Damn," he said. "How many wives you got?" Daniel didn't respond, because for the first time, he didn't know the answer himself. Emily watched the same broadcast from her living room. The reporter stood outside the courthouse, speaking quickly. Sources say investigators are now working with federal agencies to re-examine death certificates, prescription records, and consulting physicians tied to Carter over a 15-year period. 15 years. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. She hadn't known him that long, which meant his story had begun before her, and it nearly ended with her. Rachel called her immediately. "They're talking about other women," she said. "On every channel." "I know," Emily replied. "What if someone comes after you?" Rachel whispered. Emily paused. "They already did," she said. "They just failed." Inside the DA's office, chaos reigned. Boxes arrived daily. Old case files, insurance claims, hospital discharge summaries. Deaths once ruled natural were now being questioned. Patterns emerged, not obvious, not identical, but close enough to make people uncomfortable. Same age range, same symptoms, financial gain, and always Daniel, on the periphery, close enough to benefit, far enough to avoid blame. Until now. Daniel's attorney requested an emergency meeting. Her voice was tight. "This has escalated. Your case is no longer isolated." Daniel sat stiffly. "They don't have proof," she said. "They don't need it yet. They need momentum." Daniel laughed once, sharp, humorless. "So this is a witch hunt?" She didn't laugh back. "This is what happens when patterns get names, and yours has one now." Emily was called to testify again, this time not about Daniel, but about herself. "How did you survive?" one investigator asked. Emily answered honestly. "I got suspicious," she said, "and I checked." The investigator nodded. "And if you hadn't?" Emily didn't answer immediately, because the truth was heavy. "I would have been dead," she finally said, "and no one would have questioned it." That answer changed something in the room, because it reframed everything. This wasn't a genius criminal undone by mistakes. This was a system that almost worked. Daniel was moved again, protective custody, not for his safety, but for order.
Other inmates weren't asking questions anymore, they were drawing conclusions. "You hear about the one in Phoenix?" someone muttered. "No," another replied. "But I heard there's one in Seattle." Daniel stopped listening, because the stories were multiplying faster than he could track. And the worst part, some of them were wrong, but enough were right. Emily began receiving letters, not threats, not praise, stories. Women whose sisters had died, daughters whose mothers never came home, friends who had always felt something was off. They weren't accusing her, they were asking her to speak. Emily read every letter, and each one added weight. Vanessa warned her, "This will change your life," she said. "You won't get anonymity back." Emily nodded. "I know." "And if you keep pushing," Vanessa continued, "you'll become a symbol." Emily looked at her. "I already am," she said quietly. "I just didn't choose it." The prosecution announced a press conference. Emily didn't attend. She watched from home as the DA stepped forward. "We are reopening 6 cases," he said, "and reviewing additional unexplained deaths." 6. Emily closed her eyes. Daniel almost made it 7. Daniel learned about the press conference after it aired. A guard leaned in as he passed. "6 so far," he said. "Guess you were busy." Daniel lay back on his bunk. For the first time since the arrest, his mind stopped racing, because the math was simple now. Even if he beat one charge, even if evidence failed, the weight would crush him. Not legally, socially, historically. Emily stood in front of a mirror that night. She studied her face. The woman staring back didn't look like a survivor. She looked like a witness. And witnesses don't get to walk away. Daniel spent years hiding behind uncertainty. Uncertainty vanishes because one reopened case delivers something no one expected. A mistake Daniel made long before Emily. One that leaves behind physical proof. And once that evidence surfaces, this story stops being about how many and starts being about how long he planned it.
The case that broke Daniel Carter wasn't the most recent. It wasn't Emily's. It was the one he thought no one would ever look at again. The file came from Maricopa County, Arizona. A woman named Laura Bennett. She had died 11 years earlier. Cause of death? Cardiac arrhythmia. Contributing factors: stress, genetic predisposition. No foul play suspected. The file was closed in less than 30 days. Too clean, too fast. The investigator assigned to the reopened case didn't know Daniel personally. That helped. She didn't carry anger. She didn't carry bias. She carried questions, and one of them wouldn't let go. Why had Laura's toxicology report been summarized but never attached? Emily sat in the DA's office when the call came in. The investigator spoke carefully. "We found preserved tissue samples," she said. "Unusual considering the age of the case." Emily felt her breath catch. "Why were they preserved?" she asked. The investigator hesitated. "Because Laura worked in biomedical research," she replied. "Her family requested extended storage." Emily closed her eyes. Daniel hadn't known that. Daniel was confident that morning. He had reviewed the charges again with his attorney. Attempted murder, fraud, financial abuse. All arguable. All arguable. Past cases? Speculative. No bodies, no weapons, no fingerprints. He had survived worse. Then his attorney walked in without sitting down. "We have a problem," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "You've been saying that a lot." She placed a report on the table. Actual paper. Daniel's faded. "They retested preserved samples from Arizona," she said.
and they found compounds inconsistent with natural cardiac failure. Daniel stared at the report. "That's impossible," he said. "They wouldn't—" "They did," she replied, "and the compound matches a class of drugs you later researched extensively." Daniel swallowed. Emily didn't celebrate when she heard. She didn't cry. She didn't feel relief. She felt something colder. Recognition. Daniel hadn't just been sloppy once. He had been learning. Laura wasn't the end of his pattern. She was the beginning. The compound had a name, obscure, outdated, rarely prescribed, but Laura worked in a lab that studied it, and Daniel visited her there. Visitors were logged, names recorded, security cameras archived. 11 years old, but intact. Daniel Carter appeared 3 times in that footage, watching, asking questions, learning. The prosecutor laid it out carefully during a strategy meeting. This isn't just homicide. This is rehearsal. Emily felt a chill. He tested it, the prosecutor continued. Adjusted variables, learned dosage curves. So that by the time he reached me, Emily said, he knew exactly what he was doing. The prosecutor finished. Daniel's attorney stopped sugarcoating. They're adding first-degree murder, with premeditation. Daniel leaned forward. They don't have motive, he said. They have financial gain and a pattern of escalation. Daniel laughed, sharp and hollow. She wasn't rich. Laura barely had anything. The attorney looked at him. She had access, she said, and you didn't yet. That's when Daniel realized what they were really saying. Laura wasn't chosen for her money. She was chosen for her utility. Emily stood alone that night in her kitchen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She poured a glass of water and stared at it for a long time before drinking. 11 years. That's how long Daniel had been refining this. She had married a man who had already practiced killing. Daniel was moved again, this time not for safety, for classification. The word predatory appeared in his file. That word travels fast. Doors closed differently after that. Eyes lingered longer. Men didn't ask questions anymore. They just watched. The Arizona family was notified. Laura's sister flew in 2 days later. Emily met her once, just once. The woman didn't scream, didn't cry. She said only one thing. "I always thought she was careful," she whispered. "I didn't know he was." Emily had no answer for that. The press conference was no longer cautious. Prosecutors spoke plainly now. This was not a crime of passion, the DA said. This was a long-term, calculated methodology. Methodology. Not marriage, not love. Method. Daniel read the indictment that night. First-degree murder, attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, aggravated abuse of trust. He stopped at the last page, the summary. The defendant demonstrated a pattern of deliberate learning, experimentation, and escalation over more than a decade. Daniel folded the paper carefully. For the first time, he felt something close to grief, not for the women, for the illusion that he was smarter than everyone else. Emily stood at the window as rain hit the glass. She finally understood something she had avoided until now. Daniel hadn't been trying to kill her quietly. He had been trying to kill her perfectly, and he almost succeeded. Daniel's first real mistake wasn't getting caught. It was believing no one would ever look backward. Investigators do exactly that and uncover a detail Daniel never accounted for.
a witness who wasn't supposed to remember anything at all. And once that memory resurfaces, Daniel's entire timeline collapses.
Daniel Carter had always believed memory was unreliable, that people forgot, that time softened details, that grief blurred edges. He built his life and his crimes around that assumption. It was the reason he spaced things out, why he never repeated the same method exactly, why he trusted paperwork more than people. What he never accounted for was the one person who wasn't supposed to remember anything at all. The files surfaced during a routine re-review, not flagged, not highlighted, almost discarded. A nurse's note from St. Luke's Medical Center dated 11 years earlier, the night Laura Bennett died. The handwriting was shaky, the note itself was brief. Patient agitated before cardiac event. Male companion present, asked unusual questions about medication interactions. The nurse's name was Evelyn Moore. Status: retired. Age: 72. Diagnosis: early stage dementia. The defense immediately dismissed it. Unreliable, medically compromised memory. But the prosecutor didn't agree. He'd learned something during this case. People forget facts. They don't forget feelings. Emily wasn't present when they visited Evelyn Moore. That was intentional. This wasn't about influence. It was about truth. Evelyn sat in a small care facility, sunlight pooling at her feet. She didn't recognize the investigators at first. She didn't know the date. But when they said Laura Bennett, something changed. Her hand tightened on the armrest. "He was there," she said suddenly. The investigators exchanged glances. "Who was?" one asked gently. "The man," Evelyn replied. "The quiet one." Daniel felt the shift before anyone told him. It arrived as a change in tone. Lawyers spoke slower, guards watched longer, questions stopped being hypothetical. When his attorney finally told him, her voice was flat. "They found a nurse," she said. "She remembers Laura." Daniel exhaled sharply. "She has dementia," he said. "That won't hold." "She doesn't remember her own grandchildren," the attorney replied, "but she remembers you." Daniel's fingers curled. "That's impossible." "No," the attorney said. "It's inconvenient." Evelyn Moore didn't remember dates, but she remembered fear. She remembered the way Daniel stood too close to Laura's bed, the way he asked questions no husband should know to ask. What happens if these mix? How long before symptoms escalate? What looks natural? She remembered telling him to step back. She remembered the look he gave her. Not anger, assessment. Emily listened to the recorded interview that night. She sat very still. Because Evelyn didn't describe a killer, she described a student. "He was calm, like he was taking notes," Evelyn said in the recording. Emily closed her eyes. That was Daniel. The defense scrambled. They attacked credibility, mental capacity, medical reliability, but something had shifted. Because Evelyn's testimony didn't stand alone, it aligned with the preserved tissue, with the lab visits, with Daniel's later research patterns. Memory didn't prove murder, but it anchored intent, and intent is what turns suspicion into certainty. Daniel was angry now, not panicked, angry, because memory was supposed to fail. He counted on it. That night, alone in his cell, he replayed that hospital room in his mind. Laura pale, machines humming, the nurse watching. Had she really been watching that closely? Had he underestimated her? The answer made his chest tighten. Yes. Emily met the prosecutor the next morning. "She's willing to testify," he said, "if the court allows." Emily hesitated.
"She's vulnerable," she said. The prosecutor nodded. "We'll be careful." Emily looked down. "She shouldn't have to do this," she said. "She already did," he replied. "She just didn't know it would take this long to matter." Evelyn Moore took the stand 2 weeks later. She walked slowly. She looked small. The defense expected confusion. They got clarity. When asked about Daniel, Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I remember him," she said. "I didn't like him." The courtroom leaned forward. "Why not?" the defense attorney asked. Evelyn frowned. "Because he wasn't worried. He was curious." Daniel stared straight ahead. Emily didn't look at him. She watched the jury. She saw the moment it changed, not when Evelyn spoke, but when she stopped. When she said softly, "She was dying, and he was learning." That sentence traveled faster than any evidence. It appeared in headlines, quoted, replayed, etched. Daniel Carter, he was learning. The defense tried one last maneuver. They filed to exclude the testimony. The judge denied it. "Memory impairment does not equal absence of truth," he ruled. "The jury will decide weight." Daniel's attorney closed her folder slowly. "This is bad," she said. Daniel said nothing, because he knew. Emily received a letter that night, handwritten, from Evelyn. It was short. "I'm sorry I didn't stop him. Thank you for finishing it." Emily pressed the paper to her chest. For the first time since this began, she cried. Daniel was returned to his cell late. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Memory, the one variable he never controlled, the one witness he never silenced. Daniel believed time erased everything. Time does the opposite. It brings someone forward who never spoke before. A voice Daniel assumed was too small, too young, too broken to matter. And once that voice is heard, Daniel loses the last thing he has left, the ability to explain himself.
Daniel Carter had always believed in hierarchy. Adults over children, professionals over patients, men who spoke clearly over those who hesitated. That belief had protected him for years. It was the reason he never worried about the smallest witnesses, the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who didn't have language yet. He was wrong. The email arrived late at night. It wasn't sent to Emily directly. It was sent to the Victim Support Unit, then forwarded to the prosecution, then finally shared with Emily under careful supervision. Subject: I think I remember something. The sender was Maya Bennett, Laura Bennett's daughter. Age at the time of her mother's death, 6. Emily stared at the name for a long time before opening the file. She already knew what fear felt like. This was different. This was responsibility. Maya was 17 now. She didn't claim certainty. She didn't accuse. She simply wrote, "I always thought it was a bad dream, but after seeing the news, I'm not sure anymore." The prosecution moved carefully. Trauma memory was volatile, but they listened. Maya met with a child psychologist first, then investigators, then finally prosecutors. Emily was not present. This wasn't her space to occupy. Maya described fragments, not scenes, sensations. Her mother's hand squeezing hers too tight, a man's voice she didn't recognize, the smell of antiseptic, and one thing she had never forgotten, the way the man looked at her. "He noticed me," Maya said quietly during the recorded interview. "That's why I remember him." The room went silent. "What do you mean?" the interviewer asked. "He smiled," Maya replied. "Not like people do to kids, like I wasn't supposed to be there." Daniel found out 2 days later. Not from his attorney, from a guard who shouldn't have said anything. Girl from Arizona's testifying, the kid. Daniel's heart slammed once, hard, then steadied. She was 6, Daniel said to no one. She doesn't remember anything. But his voice lacked conviction, because deep down, he remembered her. Daniel had always been careful around adults. Children were different. They were variables. He remembered the girl in the hospital room, quiet, watching. He had smiled automatically. A mistake. The defense strategy collapsed overnight. You can argue science, you can attack procedure, you can confuse juries with language, but you cannot cross-examine a memory that admits uncertainty. Maya never said he killed my mother. She said, I remember him being there when he shouldn't have been. That was enough. Emily watched the interview footage alone. She paused it several times, not because it was unclear, because it was devastating. Maya described something Emily recognized instantly. The stillness, the absence of panic, Daniel's calm. Vanessa called Emily afterward. Her voice was unsteady. That girl, she said. She described him exactly. Emily closed her eyes. He never counted on children. They don't forget what feels wrong. Daniel's attorney requested a meeting. She didn't sit down. This changes the calculus. Jurors don't forget children. Daniel leaned forward. She's guessing. She wants answers. Yes, and the jury will believe she deserves them. Daniel laughed softly. Belief isn't evidence. No, but it's gravity. The prosecution made a decision. They would not put Maya on the stand immediately. They would wait, let the defense lock themselves into denial, then introduce her testimony late. Strategic. Devastating. Emily struggled that night, not with anger, with guilt. If she hadn't survived, if she hadn't looked closer, Maya still would believe it was a bad dream. How many others were still asleep? Daniel began losing privileges, not as punishment, as precaution. He stopped receiving newspapers, television access restricted. The world was moving without him now. He sensed it. The courtroom changed the day Maya entered the building. Not the room, the building. People whispered. Not gossip. Reverence. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't emotional. She wore a plain sweater and held her hands together tightly. Emily saw her once, briefly, in the hallway. Their eyes met. Maya nodded. Emily nodded back. That was all. Maya's testimony was short. The judge limited it. No speculation, no accusations, just memory. I remember my mom being scared, and I remember him not being. Daniel stared at the table. I remember thinking I should be quiet, like if I made noise, something bad would happen. She swallowed. And I remember him noticing me and deciding I didn't matter. That sentence landed like a verdict. Daniel didn't look up. He couldn't, because in that moment, something finally broke. Not the case, the myth. Emily left the courtroom early. She couldn't watch the rest. Some things didn't need witnessing twice. That night, Daniel sat alone in his cell. No lawyer, no paperwork, no strategy, just memory. He ignored children because they had no power. Now, one of them ended him. Daniel believed silence was protection. Silence turns on him as someone who stayed quiet for years finally speaks. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, because Daniel is no longer worth protecting. And when that testimony lands, there will be no narrative left to control.
For years, Daniel Carter had relied on one simple truth. People stay silent when silence protects them. Fear works. Shame works. Self-interest works best of all. That belief had carried him through marriages, money, and murder. Until it didn't. The call came from a place no one had been looking. Not Arizona, not California, not the hospitals. New Jersey, a quiet suburb, a forgotten address, a man who had never appeared in any file. Until now. His name was Thomas Reeve, former accountant, former friend, former fixer. He hadn't been close to Daniel emotionally. Daniel didn't allow that. But he had been close to numbers to see what didn't belong. At first, he told himself it was coincidence, irregular withdrawals, insurance payouts timed too perfectly, accounts closed just before death, patterns that made sense if you didn't want them not to. So Thomas stayed silent for 13 years. Emily learned about Thomas Reeve from the prosecutor, not the press. This one's different, the prosecutor said. He's not emotional. He's not broken. Then why now? Emily asked. The prosecutor paused. Because Daniel stopped being powerful. Thomas didn't come forward because of guilt. He came forward because the risk equation changed. Daniel could no longer protect him. And suddenly, silence became a liability. Daniel sensed something was wrong before he heard the name. His attorney arrived late, didn't meet his eyes. "This is serious," she said. Daniel leaned back. "Everything is serious now," he replied. She slid a document across the table, a financial reconstruction. Daniel scanned it once, then again. "No," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "He's cooperating." Daniel laughed once, brittle, disbelieving. "Thomas wouldn't," he said. "He owes me." "He owes himself more," the attorney said. Thomas testified without hesitation. He didn't dramatize, he didn't editorialize, he explained how Daniel asked him to move money quietly, how beneficiaries changed shortly before deaths, how life insurance policies appeared suddenly, then vanished. He was always calm, never rushed, never emotional. The prosecutor asked the key question. "Did you ever suspect criminal intent?" Thomas paused. "Yes," he said, "but suspicion is cheaper than certainty." The courtroom stilled. "And why did you remain silent?" the prosecutor asked. Thomas didn't look at Daniel. Because he was winning. That sentence changed everything. Winning, not grieving, not surviving. Winning. Daniel's defense collapsed internally that day. No argument could explain away numbers. No appeal to emotion could touch timelines. Thomas didn't accuse, he documented. Emily sat in the gallery, hands folded. This was the first testimony that didn't hurt, because it wasn't about loss, it was about exposure. Daniel tried one last maneuver. He instructed his attorney to suggest coercion, blackmail, fear. The attorney tried. "Mr. Reeve, isn't it true you feared Daniel?" Thomas smiled slightly. "No," he replied. "I feared getting caught later." The attorney closed her folder. There were no more questions.
That night, Daniel didn't rage. He didn't shout. He lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Because something had finally become clear. This wasn't a collapse, it was erosion. Piece by piece, everything he built was washing away. Emily received a letter that evening. Not from a victim, not from a stranger, from Thomas Reeve. It was brief. I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry you were the one who survived. Emily read it twice, then folded it carefully. The prosecution adjusted strategy overnight. With Thomas's testimony, they didn't need speculation. They had infrastructure. The case transformed from "did he" to "how did he get away with it so long?" That question carries weight. Juries don't forgive systems that fail for decades. Daniel's attorney met him one final time before closing arguments. "We can still negotiate sentencing, instead of life without parole, instead of..." "Instead of what?" Daniel asked. She didn't answer. Daniel nodded. That told him everything. Emily stood outside the courthouse that afternoon. Reporters shouted questions. She didn't answer. She had learned something crucial watching Thomas testify. Silence is power only when someone is afraid to break it. Daniel no longer inspired fear, only disgust. Inside the jail, Daniel overheard two guards talking. Accountant flipped. That's it. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time since his arrest, he didn't think about escape. He thought about legacy, and realized he would have none. Daniel believed loyalty would outlast evidence. He was wrong. The courtroom stops asking what happened and starts deciding what Daniel deserves. And when sentencing enters the conversation, every lie he ever told becomes irrelevant.
There comes a moment in every trial when facts stop mattering. Not because they disappear, but because they've already done their work. That moment arrived quietly in Daniel Carter's case. No gasps, no shouting, no dramatic reveal, just a subtle shift in the room, the kind you feel before you understand it. The courtroom stopped asking what happened. It began asking, what kind of man does this? Closing arguments lasted 2 days, not because the lawyers needed the time, but because the weight needed space to settle. The prosecution didn't raise its voice. They didn't replay photos. They didn't lean on tragedy. They walked the jury through a timeline. 15 years, 7 women, 1 method, and 1 man who benefited every time. This wasn't rage, the prosecutor said calmly. This was preference. That word landed harder than accusation. Preference. Daniel watched the jury more than the lawyers. He had always believed in people's desire to doubt, to hesitate, to look away from uncomfortable truths. But something had changed. No one looked away anymore. The defense tried to reframe him. Not innocent, just human. A man who made mistakes. A man who loved poorly. A man who panicked. But panic is messy. Daniel was never messy. Emily was called to give a final statement. Not testimony, impact. She hadn't planned to speak, but the judge asked, and she agreed. She walked to the podium slowly. She didn't bring notes. I used to think surviving meant winning. I don't anymore. The courtroom was silent. I survived because I noticed something small, a feeling, a detail. She paused. My women before me noticed too. They just didn't have time. Daniel didn't look at her.
not once. Rachel spoke next. Her voice shook, not with fear, but fury held too long. "He didn't just lie to me," she said. "He built a future for himself on the assumption that my child wouldn't matter." Vanessa didn't speak long. She didn't need to. "I trusted him because he mirrored competence. That wasn't intelligence, it was rehearsal." Daniel's attorney declined to let him speak, a strategic decision. The judge asked anyway. "Mr. Carter," he said, "do you wish to address the court?" Daniel stood. He looked smaller than he used to, still composed, still controlled. "Yes," he said. The room tensed. "I didn't plan to hurt anyone," Daniel began. "I made mistakes. I loved imperfectly." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Daniel continued, "I'm not the monster you want me to be." Emily closed her eyes, not in pain, in recognition. The judge stopped him. "Mr. Carter," he said evenly, "this is not a conversation about identity." Daniel faltered. "This is about responsibility." Daniel nodded once. He sat, and something in him collapsed, quietly, completely. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. No questions, no requests, no hesitation. When they returned, no one was surprised. Guilty. On all counts. First-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, aggravated fraud. Daniel didn't react. He had known. Sentencing was scheduled for the following week, but the verdict had already traveled. By the time Daniel returned to his cell, everyone knew. Not whispers, certainty. Emily didn't attend sentencing. She couldn't. Not because she was afraid, but because she was finished. She watched from home. The judge spoke carefully. "This court has heard evidence of a sustained pattern of calculated harm, not driven by emotion, not by desperation." He paused. "But by entitlement." That word echoed. Entitlement. Daniel stood as the sentence was read. Life imprisonment, without parole, plus additional years that didn't matter. The judge continued, "You exploited trust as a weapon. You will never be free to do so again." Daniel nodded, as if receiving instructions. When it was over, the room exhaled. Not relief, release. Emily sat alone afterward. No reporters, no friends, just silence. She realized something then. Justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like weight leaving the room. Daniel was transferred that night. A permanent facility. No movement, no leverage, no audience. He stared through the small window of the transport van. Not angry, not scared. Empty. The story didn't end there. It never does. Families still grieved. Files still reopened. Questions still lingered. But one thing was finished. Daniel Carter would never touch another life again. Emily stood by her window as the sun set. She thought of the women before her, not as victims, but as warnings that had finally been heard. The court decided Daniel's punishment. Emily faces a harder question. What to do with the life she got back, and whether survival comes with an obligation to make sure this never happens again. Because some stories don't end with a verdict. They begin there.
The world didn't pause when Daniel Carter was sentenced. There was no moment where everything felt finished. Traffic still moved, emails still arrived, the sun still rose the next morning. Emily noticed that immediately. Justice, she realized, doesn't come with silence, it comes with continuation. The first thing Emily felt after the verdict wasn't relief, it was absence. For months, years really, her life had revolved around vigilance, watching, calculating, preparing for danger. Now the danger was contained, and the space it left behind felt unfamiliar, almost frightening. Emily tried to return to her old routines. She went back to work, answered messages, smiled when appropriate. But something fundamental had shifted. Design meetings felt trivial. Deadlines felt hollow. Small complaints felt unreal. She had seen what people were capable of when no one was watching, and she couldn't unsee it. Rachel noticed first. "You don't look afraid anymore," she said one afternoon. "You look untethered." Emily nodded. "I don't know who I am without the fight," she admitted. Rachel looked at her daughter playing nearby. "Then maybe it's not over," she said quietly. The letters didn't stop after the sentencing. If anything, they increased. Women who had dated Daniel briefly, women who had ignored instincts they now questioned, families who wanted timelines, details, closure. Emily read them all. She didn't respond to most because she was still learning how to breathe again. Vanessa approached her differently, not with sympathy, with structure. "You can walk away," Vanessa said one evening. "No one would blame you." Emily considered it, a quiet life, anonymity, distance. "I know," she said, "but if I do, someone else will be the one who notices too late." Vanessa nodded. "That's what I thought you'd say." Emily met with a trauma specialist 3 weeks later, not because she felt broken, but because she didn't want to be hardened. Survival had sharpened her instincts. She didn't want them to turn into walls. "You didn't just survive," the therapist said gently. "You interrupted something." Emily absorbed that slowly. Interrupted. Not ended. Not erased. Interrupted. The prosecutor called one final time. "We're reopening 2 more cases," he said. "We wouldn't have without you." Emily closed her eyes. "That doesn't feel like victory," she replied. "No," he said, "but it is impact." Emily stood in the same living room one night, the place where Daniel had once handed her poison disguised as care. She looked at the space differently now, not as a crime scene, as a decision point. She packed the last of his things into boxes, not with anger, with finality. She didn't keep the house. She sold it quietly, moved somewhere smaller, brighter, with windows that opened. Emily began speaking, cautiously at first, small groups, private rooms, off-the-record conversations, not about Daniel, about patterns, trust abuse, medical manipulation, financial coercion. She watched recognition flicker across faces, the same recognition she once felt alone. One night, she received a message from a woman she didn't know. "I stopped taking pills my partner gave me after hearing you speak. The doctor says they weren't right." Emily stared at the screen for a long time. Then she sat down and cried. Daniel wrote once, a short letter. No apology, no rage, just a statement. "You didn't have to do all this." Emily didn't respond. She understood something now that Daniel never would. She hadn't done it to him. She had done it past him. Emily visited the cemetery once, not Laura's grave, not the others, just a quiet place with no names she knew. She stood there and breathed. Then she left. The media interest faded eventually. Another story replaced this one, another scandal, another outrage. But the quiet work continued.
behind closed doors, in policy meetings, in protocols that changed because someone had survived long enough to speak. Emily didn't call herself brave. She didn't call herself strong. She called herself attentive, because attention, she had learned, saves lives. Daniel's story is finished. A final truth surfaces, one that reframes everything Emily thought she understood about survival and forces her to confront a question she's avoided from the beginning. Was she ever really the target, or was she the interruption Daniel never planned for?
Emily used to believe survival was accidental, that she lived because she noticed something small, because timing favored her, because luck intervened. That belief had helped her sleep, until the file arrived. It came from the medical board, not the courts, and administrative review. Routine, they said, triggered by changes in reporting standards. The email was neutral. The attachment was not. The document detailed Daniel Carter's prescription acquisition patterns across 15 years. Emily scanned it once, then again, then a third time, slower. Something didn't fit. Daniel had always escalated, carefully, incrementally. Each woman had received a higher dosage, a shorter timeline, less margin for error. Except Emily. Her dosage plateaued, month after month, never increasing, never accelerating. Emily's hands went cold. She took the file to her therapist. They sat quietly while Emily explained. He was refining, the therapist said, and you were... Emily didn't answer, because the truth was forming too clearly. Emily had been different, not wealthier, others had more, not weaker, others had been sicker, not isolated, others had been more alone. But Emily had something else. Visibility. Her career put her in rooms with people who asked questions. Her social circle overlapped with medical professionals. Her life left trails. Daniel had noticed that and adjusted. Emily wasn't the end goal. She was the control group. The realization hit her slowly, then all at once. Daniel hadn't been rushing to kill her. He had been observing, watching how much he could take, how far he could push, how long before suspicion surfaced. He wanted to know the threshold. Emily was the measurement. That was why he stole gradually, why he replaced valuable slowly, why he never escalated the dosage. He wasn't done with her. Not yet. Emily felt sick. Not from fear, from proximity. She hadn't escaped death at the last second. She had been standing inside a process, one designed to continue. She thought of the mornings, the smile, the kiss, the pills. He had been watching her reactions, cataloging, learning. Emily returned to the prosecutor with the file. He read it silently. "This suggests prolonged experimentation," he said. "Yes," Emily replied. "And I was the experiment." The prosecutor leaned back. "That means something else," he said. Emily already knew. "It means," she said quietly, "it would have perfected it." Emily went home and sat in the dark. For the first time since Daniel's sentencing, she felt afraid again. Not of him, of what almost existed. A version of Daniel who never made a mistake. She understood now why she felt unsettled after the verdict, why closure never arrived. Because the danger she interrupted wasn't complete. She hadn't survived the end. She had stopped the middle. Emily wrote one final statement, not for court, for herself. "I was not chosen to die. I was chosen to test how quietly someone could disappear." She folded the paper and put it away. That night, Emily dreamed of nothing. No fear, no images, just silence.
And for the first time, silence felt earned. The next morning, she made a decision, not to speak more, but to teach differently. Not warning signs after damage, but pattern recognition before harm. She shifted her focus. Doctors, pharmacists, insurance auditors, systems, not individuals. Emily understood her role now, not victim, not hero, interruption. She visited Daniel once, not to confront him, to confirm something. She looked at him through the glass. He looked older, smaller. She spoke first. "You weren't finished," she said. Daniel didn't respond. "You were testing," she continued, "and I stopped you." Daniel smiled faintly, just once. That was all she needed. Emily stood and left. She didn't look back, because some truths don't need answers. They need endings. Emily believed understanding Daniel would bring peace. It didn't. The final piece falls into place, revealing what Daniel was ultimately building toward, and why Emily surviving wasn't just unlikely, it was catastrophic for him.
Daniel Carter was never interested in murder. That was the mistake everyone made when they tried to understand him. Murder is emotional, messy, reactive. Daniel hated mess. What he wanted was control that scaled. Emily understood this only after everything was over. After the verdict, after the sentencing, after the silence. The truth came not from Daniel, but from the systems he had been quietly positioning himself inside. The final report arrived 6 months after his imprisonment. Not criminal, corporate. It came from an insurance oversight board that had been auditing irregular consulting arrangements. Daniel's name appeared not as a policyholder, as an advisor. Emily read the report slowly. Daniel had been positioning himself as an independent risk consultant. Not formally, not visibly, but consistently. He attended conferences, submitted white papers under pseudonyms, networked with underwriters, actuaries, pharmaceutical intermediaries, always asking the same kind of questions. What mortality patterns go unnoticed? What level of correlation triggers review? How do you distinguish coincidence from design? Daniel wasn't building toward a single perfect crime. He was building toward invisibility at scale. Emily felt the implications settle in her body. If he had succeeded, truly succeeded, he wouldn't have needed marriages anymore, or relationships, or proximity. He would have become infrastructure. The report outlined a chilling possibility. Daniel had been advocating for algorithmic risk models that deprioritized low-probability anomalies. In simpler terms, deaths that looked statistically boring. Emily closed the file. She finally understood the scope. The women weren't just victims, they were data points. Daniel had been testing how to disappear people into averages. Emily brought the report to Vanessa. Vanessa read it without speaking. When she finished, she leaned back. "He wasn't just killing," she said. "He was proving something." "Yes," Emily replied, "that people trust systems more than intuition." Vanessa nodded slowly. "And that once something is normalized," she added, "no one looks twice." Emily realized then why Daniel had never panicked when suspicions arose, why he had been patient, why he had tolerated delay. He wasn't trying to outrun attention, he was trying to outlast it. Emily's survival didn't just expose him, it invalidated his entire premise. Because systems don't account for interruption, they account for trend. Emily was a statistical impossibility. The insurance board froze multiple initiatives quietly. Language changed, thresholds adjusted.
Human review reintroduced in places where it had been removed. No press release, no headlines, but real impact. Emily understood now why she was so dangerous to Daniel. Not because she accused him, because she noticed. And noticing breaks models. Daniel never asked about the report. He never asked what she had discovered. But during their final visit, he said something revealing. "You would have been comfortable in the end," he told her. Emily looked at him. "With what?" she asked. "With not knowing," he replied. Emily shook her head. "No," she said, "I wouldn't." Daniel smiled faintly. That smile confirmed everything. Emily left the facility for the last time and felt something unfamiliar. Not closure, alignment. The pieces finally fit. She began working quietly with regulatory groups, not as a survivor, as a consultant. She taught them how harm hides inside normality, how predators think in margins, how danger often looks boring until it's catastrophic. She never used Daniel's name. She didn't need to. His methodology had already been dismantled. Years later, a junior analyst asked her during a workshop, "How did you know something was wrong?" She thought about it. The pills, the bag, the feeling. She noticed something small, and I didn't talk myself out of it. Daniel Carter will die in prison, not remembered as brilliant, not feared as a mastermind, but documented as a flaw, a variable the system didn't expect, until someone forced it to adapt. Emily keeps one thing from her old life, not evidence, not documents, a note she wrote herself years earlier. Attention saves lives. She doesn't think of Daniel anymore. She thinks of what didn't happen, the lives that never became data, the patterns that never completed. Some people survive violence, others prevent futures. Emily did both. Epilogue tease. You think this story ends with Daniel in prison. It doesn't. The last chapter isn't about him at all. It's about the quiet ripple Emily never expected. The one that proves survival isn't the opposite of death. It's the interruption of an entire future.
Years later, Daniel Carter's name barely surfaced anymore. Not in headlines, not in classrooms, not even in true crime forums that once obsessed over him. His story had lost its edge. That was exactly how Emily knew she had won. True evil doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to be repeated. And Daniel's future had been erased so completely that even his past began to fade. Emily lived in a smaller city now. No dramatic skyline, no glass towers, just a place where mornings were quiet and people remembered each other's names. She didn't introduce herself as a survivor. She didn't introduce herself as anything. She preferred anonymity, because attention, she had learned, is only powerful when it's directed, not absorbed. Once a year, Emily gave a closed-door talk. No press, no recordings. Doctors, pharmacists, insurance auditors, data analysts, people whose jobs existed in spreadsheets and probabilities. She never mentioned Daniel. She didn't need to. Instead, she told them stories about patterns that feel too small to matter. A prescription that doesn't quite match. A financial change that happens too gradually. A patient whose decline feels off rather than dramatic. Most harm, she would say calmly, hides inside things that look normal. After one session, a young woman approached her, nervous, careful. My supervisor told me to ignore a discrepancy. It was within margin. Emily looked at her. And what did you feel?
The woman hesitated, uneasy. Emily nodded. Then don't ignore it. That was all she said. 3 months later, that same woman sent an email. We caught something early. No one died. Emily stared at the message for a long time, then closed her laptop. Emily never visited Daniel again. She didn't need confirmation anymore. The world had moved on without him. That was the real sentence. One autumn afternoon, Emily stood in line at a pharmacy. Nothing remarkable, just fluorescent lights and quiet impatience. The man in front of her asked the pharmacist a question about drug interactions. The pharmacist paused, checked twice, asked another colleague. Emily felt a strange warmth in her chest. Not pride, continuity. Emily sometimes thought about the women who never got to notice the small things. Laura, the others. She didn't imagine them frozen in tragedy. She imagined them as interruptions too, ones that came too late to stop Daniel, but early enough to leave traces. Traces Emily had followed. On the anniversary of her hospital visit, Emily walked alone through a park. No ritual, no flowers, just movement. She remembered the moment she sat on the bathroom floor, pills flushed away, realizing her life had split in two. Before noticing, after noticing. She smiled softly, not because it was over, but because it had mattered. Daniel Carter would die in prison, quietly, with no audience, no legacy, no continuation. That was the cruelest ending for someone who wanted permanence. Emily's life never returned to what it had been. It became something else, something lighter, something sharper. She never stopped noticing, but she no longer did it out of fear. She did it out of responsibility. One evening, years later, Emily received a message from a woman she'd never met. "I didn't take the pills my husband gave me. Something felt wrong. The doctor confirmed it. You saved my life." Emily didn't reply immediately. She sat with it, let it settle. Then she typed back, "You saved your own life. You paid attention." Emily closed the window and turned off the light. The world outside continued, unaware of what had been prevented. That was fine. Prevention doesn't need witnesses. Some stories end with justice. This one ended with interruption. A future that never happened. A pattern that never completed. A silence that never returned. And somewhere, in places no one will ever connect back to Emily Carter, lives continue. Not because of heroism, not because of revenge, but because one woman noticed something small and refused to ignore it.